My boss smirked while the entire office laughed at me. Not because I made a mistake, but because I dared to ask for credit for work I actually did. And when he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "People like you should just be grateful to even have a job here," I decided right there. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to destroy the one thing he cared about most. If you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or treated like you didn't matter, this story is going to feel incredibly satisfying. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the wildest workplace revenge stories you'll hear today. 3 years ago, I landed what I thought was my dream job. Small marketing company, modern office, good salary, free coffee machines, the whole fake "we are a family here" vibe. And honestly, at first, it felt amazing. I worked harder than everyone else there. I stayed late, skipped lunches, answered emails at midnight. Not because anyone forced me to, but because I genuinely cared. And that was my first mistake. My boss, Greg, noticed pretty quickly that I was dependable. The problem was, he didn't reward dependable people. He exploited them. Greg was one of those managers who always acted charming around executives, but became a completely different person around employees. Toxic downstairs. He'd walk through the office criticizing people loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This design looks lazy. Did a child write this report? Maybe some of you just aren't cut out for this industry." And every time he insulted someone, he'd laugh afterward like it was some kind of joke. Nobody pushed back. People were terrified of him, including me. At least, at first. The worst part was how he constantly stole credit. I'd spend days building campaign strategies, researching competitors, creating presentations, and during meetings with clients, Greg would present everything as if he came up with it himself. At 2 a.m., I was thinking about innovative engagement strategies. No, I was thinking at 2 a.m. because I was the one working. But I stayed quiet because I needed the job. Then came the project that changed everything. A massive client, easily worth millions to the company over the next few years. Everyone in the office knew this account could determine promotions, bonuses, even layoffs. Greg assigned the project to me privately. Not publicly, privately, which should have been my second warning sign. For 2 straight months, my life became that project. I barely slept. I remember sitting in my apartment at 1:30 in the morning, laptop glowing in the dark, empty energy drink cans scattered across the desk while rain tapped against the windows. My eyes burned. My shoulders ached. But I kept going because I thought, if I nail this, maybe things finally change. And honestly, the campaign was brilliant. The client loved every draft. Every meeting went perfectly. Even Greg started acting nicer. That should have scared me, because toxic people are usually nicest right before they stab you in the back. Then came the final presentation. The entire company gathered in the conference room. Executives, managers, team leads. I walked in nervous but excited. My hands were shaking slightly holding my notebook. This was my moment. Greg started presenting. At first, until I noticed something strange. He kept saying I developed this strategy. I came up with this angle. I spent weeks refining this vision. My stomach dropped. No mention of me. Not once. At first, I thought maybe he'd acknowledge me. He didn't. Then one executive looked at Greg and said, "This is outstanding work. Honestly, one of the best campaigns we've seen all year." Greg smiled and said something I will never forget. "Well, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, greatness becomes instinct." People laughed. Actually laughed. Meanwhile, I was sitting there feeling my face burn with humiliation. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I remember gripping my pen so hard my fingers hurt. And then, Greg looked directly at me, smirked, and said, "Some people on the team helped with minor tasks, of course." Minor tasks. 2 months of my life reduced to minor tasks. I felt sick, but the real breaking point came afterward. When everyone started leaving the conference room, I quietly confronted him. I said, "You didn't mention me once." Greg barely looked up from his phone. Then he chuckled. You want honesty. He leaned closer. People like you are replaceable. Don't confuse hard work with importance. That sentence replayed in my head for days. People like you are replaceable. I stopped sleeping properly after that, not because I was sad anymore, because I was angry. Pure anger. And anger does something dangerous when it sits long enough beside humiliation. It becomes focus. That's when I started paying attention. Real attention. Greg wasn't just arrogant. He was sloppy. He ignored client emails, missed deadlines, forgot meetings. Why? Because people like me were secretly keeping everything together behind the scenes. And that massive client, they trusted me, not Greg. I was the one answering their late-night concerns. I was the one fixing emergencies. I was the one they called directly. That gave me an idea, a dangerous one. I didn't want revenge that would get me arrested. I wanted revenge that would expose the truth. So I started documenting everything. Every email, every revision, every timestamp. I saved proof showing I created the campaign from the ground up. Then I waited. And eventually, Greg made his biggest mistake. One Friday afternoon, he forgot to join an important client call. Not late. Forgot completely. The client was furious. I jumped in and handled the meeting myself. Afterward, the client's director stayed on the call and sighed. You seem to be the only competent person over there. That sentence hit me like lightning, because suddenly, I realized something. They trusted me more than the company. So over the next few weeks, I stayed professional, calm, helpful. Meanwhile, Greg got worse, more arrogant, more careless. Then came the disaster. Greg accidentally sent internal budget information to the client, information showing he'd been overcharging them while cutting actual campaign resources behind the scenes. The client exploded. Executives panicked. Emergency meetings everywhere. And Greg blamed me. Of course he did. He stormed toward my desk screaming loud enough for the whole office to hear. This is your fault. The office went silent. Every keyboard stopped typing. I slowly stood up. My chest was tight. But for the first time, I wasn't scared. Because I knew I had every receipt. Calmly, I opened my laptop. Then connected it to the conference room screen. Greg's face changed instantly, because suddenly, every email appeared, every file timestamp, every draft, every message proving I created the campaign, every ignored warning I'd sent him, and finally, the email showing he sent the confidential budget information. The room became dead silent. One executive adjusted his glasses and, Greg, is this true? Greg started stammering, sweating, trying to interrupt, trying to spin the story. But it was over. For the first time since I joined that company, everyone saw him exactly as he really was. A fraud. 2 days later, Greg was fired. Not quietly either. Security literally escorted him out of the building carrying a cardboard box. And the best part? As he walked past my desk, he stopped. His face was red with rage. He pointed at me and whispered, "You think you won." I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "No, I just stopped letting you take what was mine." He didn't say another word. A week later, the executives apologized to me personally. The client requested that I become their direct account manager. And the promotion Greg had been promising himself for years? I got it instead. But honestly, the promotion wasn't even the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part was realizing that the person who made me feel powerless for years was never powerful without people like me carrying him the entire time. Sometimes karma isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just the truth finally becoming impossible to ignore. And people who build their success on humiliating others eventually collapse under the weight of their own ego. If this story was satisfying, hit that like button and subscribe for more revenge stories just like this. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen someone get?